Well, a very warm welcome to everyone and welcome back to Bite-Sized Corrosion. It's hard to believe that we're now well over halfway through the year. My name is Vanessa Fisher, and it is my great honor and pleasure to be your host this afternoon. I hope you find that today's discussion of benefit and interest. Today is actually a very special edition of Bite-Sized Corrosion. In honor of Women's Day here in South Africa, which is tomorrow, we decided to have a panel discussion with 3 inspiring women engineers, and they're ladies that I've met through my work in corrosion. To start right now, I'm delighted to welcome Loshini, Naicker and Elsina Bokaba to explore with me some of the challenges and inspirations that we face as women in what still is a very male-dominated industry. So welcome this afternoon to our discussion, which we titled Hard Hats Also Come in Pink. And when we came up with the title, I remembered when I started in the industry more than 30 years ago now, hard hats didn't come in pink. They came in blue or white. And I do recall when my kids were little, probably about 8 years after I'd started in the industry, Bob the Builder was quite popular, and suddenly colored hard hats became available. And I confess, I bought a pink hard hat because I could. But let's move on. Let's start with you, Loshini. By way of introduction, you studied civil engineering, and I'd love to share with us what directed you to enter engineering at all.
Thanks, Vanessa. Well, it wasn't just the prospect of building really cool bridges. It was a combination of things. I think, like most people in the industry, I wanted to be part of improving the living conditions of others. I think to be of service to others. And from a young age, I was exposed to challenges that people faced when it came to accessing certain services and infrastructure. So that stayed with me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you and congratulations for taking that brave step. That is inspiring. Elsina, I recall you didn't have influences particularly from home, but what made you choose electrical engineering as your career choice?
Thanks, Vanessa. My passion started back while I was in high school. There was Career Expo at school. Then I fell in love with it and I started having passion with it because I'm a very persistent person. I do not give up. So I saw it as an opportunity to solve problems.
That sounds wonderful. It's so interesting. I remember career days when I was at school. They were a complete waste of time. I was at an all-girls school and we kind of were exposed to, I don't know, teaching and nursing and pretty much nothing else. And so it's really wonderful that you were exposed to engineering. And I know that it wasn't a walk in the park. And Elsina, would you be willing to share some of the challenges that you've encountered as you decided to embark on engineering and finally getting through your qualification?
Okay, so after my matric, I went to tertiary to do electrical engineering because I was very determined about it. I studied at the college. I was using NSFAS bursary. Unfortunately, I failed and then it had to drop me. Fortunately, I had a mentor. I was in a program called Infinite Family. So my mentor kept on encouraging me and she gave me all the strength that I have. And I went to look for a job. Fortunately, I found one because I had that thing of becoming an electrical engineer one day. I went to work for 1 year and I saved money. The following year, I went back to school to study again.
That's so inspiring and really just highlights your tenacity and perseverance. Thank you for sharing that. And Loshini, what is your experience in terms of challenges that you faced in this difficult choice of career, actually?
I think I have been quite lucky. I've been surrounded by very supportive colleagues, managers, and even just my employers. And I've noticed that there's been major strides in creating a more inclusive work environment, but there's always still room for improvement. If I think back to when I started my career, it was a very male-dominated industry. It was back in the early 2000s, and there wasn't a lot of female representation or role models that I could necessarily draw inspiration from or encouragement. Of course, there were some, but they weren't necessarily readily available to me or maybe applicable to my career path or goals. So I think in that regard, it maybe made me feel a bit limited in terms of what was possible for me to achieve or what opportunities were available for me. But I'm happy to say that a lot of that has changed in the last, I mean, I'm casting myself back, over 15 years ago, but currently I consider myself a mentor, and there are so many others like me. That's very encouraging to see.
It's striking, Elsina's perseverance because of a mentor, you having good mentors, but not finding the female role model. I know when I started in the corrosion industry, actually, just before I started, I went for the job interview, and because I was, and have been for many years, one of very few women in the corrosion sector, and the person who was interviewing me said to me, before you make the decision, he gave me the name of a lady called Meryl Nixon, who at the time was with the corrosion division, I think at Eskom, and he said, go and have a talk with her. And in a lot of trepidation, I did exactly that. And she was so encouraging and said to me, you can do it, because there is that fear of, well, have I stepped into this man's world and will I make it? And she definitely gave me the courage to say, okay, I can do this job. So it is interesting that women who can mentor us make such a difference. And I think you're right, Loshini, that it puts the pressure on us as women in the industry to look out for other women and to see what we can do to help them. It's also interesting how, and you're right, things have definitely changed, how client perceptions have changed. So I recall many an occasion where I would answer the phone in the company, and there were two of us at the time, and the conversation would run something along the lines of, now, sweetie, could I please speak to your boss? And I'd go, perhaps I can help you. And then there'd be something along the lines of, no, well, I need to speak to a man who knows what he's doing. And sometimes you bit your tongue and you went, I'll see if I can find someone to help you, knowing there's only one other colleague in the company you can. And other times going, well, actually, I do have my master's. How can I assist you? And so that has definitely changed. But I don't know if you've had any of those experiences where people just won't speak to you because you're just a woman.
You do get a sense of that, I think, initially, and maybe because, I was really young and new to the industry, you don't necessarily know if it is because of your age or your gender, that you kind of have to pay your dues and convince others that you might have something worthwhile to say. So yeah, there have been moments of that. I could definitely relate.
And Elsina, have you experienced that at all, where people have disregarded you because you're the woman in the room?
Yes, especially because I'm in Catholic protection and it's also male-dominated. Sometimes some men or some people think that just because you are a lady, you can do it. So yes, I have.
I think there's also that fine line. There are some things I can't do. Physically on site, I physically can't lift the chamber lids. So there's also that awkwardness sometimes where saying, well, physically I might not be able to, but intellectually we can both stand up together. And then today, I think there's still some interesting challenges. In fact, I just did a quick test before this conversation and searched online for PPE. If I needed to buy PPE straight away, I would probably go somewhere like Builders Warehouse because it's convenient. And you can filter by gender, and the options are male or unisex. And I went, that's hardly a filter. Are you aware, Loshini, of other areas where we still battle with this general perspective that doesn't include women?
I do find myself challenged personally when it comes to certain gender role ideals or expectations, in that something I think we've all maybe struggled with over the years is finding the right balance, between a demanding career, which engineering is. It's never a 9 to 5 day. It requires a lot from us. And I think most recently we have been moving into a more digital space where we have so many tools available to us in terms of software or digital platforms that requires us to upskill ourselves in order to remain relevant and to work more efficiently. But what I find myself struggling with personally is finding the right balance. And it's maybe a recurring theme. What it comes down to for me is having to look at the other aspects of my life, family, spirituality, socializing, fitness. It feels overwhelming. And as if there might be this unwritten understanding or expectation that women really should do it all and have it all. That's what I find myself struggling with most, because I think it's an issue maybe that's not just specific to women. It's also an ideal that a lot of men carry with them as well.
That is so interesting. Elsina, I don't know if you've got any perspectives you'd like to add to that.
Yes, sometimes it comes with on site, maybe there are certain things, washing dishes or picking up papers. Some will say just because you are a lady, then you have to do it.
There are still those constraints. Or sitting in a meeting and it's assumed that as the woman you'll take the minutes, which can also be a challenge. And it's to try and bring it to the attention of your colleagues that my gender shouldn't define the role. I don't mind taking the minutes, but by the same token, it shouldn't be assumed. And just back to what you were saying, Loshini, is that it's challenging to want to be, quote, superwoman. And having brought up my children through my career, I can only say that my colleague Neil Webb has put up with just about everything. And I have been incredibly fortunate, and many women aren't. But there is that guilt of, should I be with the children, but I want to be at work? Am I wrong for enjoying my work? And I think you rightly point out that I think the pressures on men are increasing. And maybe as women, that's something that we can perhaps help them navigate through. Because I think men have been moved from the man is the provider and he goes to work and that's all he does. I think the modern expectation on the modern man is exactly that he must maintain his fitness and his mental health. He must participate in the home. And I think just as much as women are still fighting in some ways for their place at the table, men are trying to grapple with how do we deal with all these roles and expectations? And I think we as women have learned quite a lot. Much of it is fly by the seat of your pants because it is challenging. I think one of the issues just looking ahead is what we can do for women entering into the field today. And if you've got any comments, Elsina, about what we can do to help women based on our experiences.
We can empower them by mentoring them, letting them know that they can do it out of passion. You can't do it because you want money. They must just let money to be the consequence of their hard work.
That's very sound advice. Thank you. And Loshini, comments from you in that regard?
Yeah, I agree fully with Elsina. I think it's not just about having a good mentor. I mean, that could be male or female. It's quite a personal choice finding the right fit of personalities when it comes to a mentor. But in addition to that, something that I would have appreciated and that I would encourage others to do is seek a group of collective women, be it a women's network or some sort of platform where you can share your experiences and learn from each other. That would maybe save us from making similar mistakes that others might have already overcome. And if I may extend that a bit further, I think at risk of sounding too cliche, just be yourself. I think we're each so wonderfully unique and have these different perspectives that we should allow that to shine. I think there's a stage in my career, again, when it was pretty early on, and being surrounded by so many males that it's easy to sort of lose your identity and want to emulate certain male or masculine characteristics where it's not necessary. I think we're now fortunate to be in a completely different environment now where, like I mentioned earlier, there's the strive to be more inclusive, and many companies allow you that freedom. So just, be yourself.
That is inspiring and good advice, actually. I think you're right. I think we do often try to aspire to fit in. I think when you think back to your childhood, your schooling years, you always want to be with the in-group, forgetting that the in-group is made of people like yourself. And I do think that where we sit today in 2023, we are fortunate that space has been created at the table for women to contribute. I think women bring a different perspective in decision making. I think not exclusively, but I do think women bring perhaps a softer edge that is quite thought-provoking and helpful. So in the conversation, I think women can be quite practical. My experience has often been that men have great ideas, but maybe don't think through the implementation necessarily. And women sometimes have a little bit of a more practical edge that can say, well, yes, that can work, but what if? And that I think is helpful, because I think it helps to round out our engineering designs so that they have considered a broader community in terms of their influence. Yeah, I'm not sure if you've got any additional comments that you'd like to add, Loshini, to the conversation.
Yeah, I think on a positive note, we definitely have come a long way. I think you had posed some of these questions, and it forced us to look back at our career, which highlights how far we have come. I could completely relate to the challenges, and I must say it's encouraging once again to see all the support that's available by way of our colleagues, managers, and employers. I love that we are having the conversations, and I hope that it won't be limited to just when people start raising awareness around Women's Day. It would be nicer to have these at a more regular interval. But it is encouraging, the direction in which we are moving.
And yourself, Elsina, any additional comments that you'd like to add to the conversation?
As a woman in engineering, it is very rewarding to see myself playing an important role in society and in the workplace. So I would like to encourage young upcoming women in engineering to believe in themselves.
And I also think it's worth saying thank you to the men who have allowed us to be here. And that sounds a bit subservient, and I don't mean it to be, but I think that it took some brave men to say we can treat women with respect in the industry, because I think at a time when I look back, there were people who would in a meeting deliberately involve me rather than exclude me. And I think that also took courage at the time where it was often sneered at. And for me, it's heartening that it's almost to the point now where I go into a meeting and I don't think about the gender. I'm still often the only woman there, but I'm less likely to think that as my first thought. And I'm more likely to see it as, gosh, we've got 3 corrosion people and 4 electrical people or whatever in the room, rather than, and I'm the only woman. I don't feel that pressure anymore, which, as you say, it shows how far we've come. And you're right, when we look back and consider the challenges and the opportunities, we can definitely see the road has been long, and for many people hard. And I think, like both of you, it's been encouraging that we've had fairly positive experiences. Thank you both. And I would like to say hats off to you both, and maybe I should rather say hard hats off to you both for joining me, for being amazing women in the industry. Thank you for persevering when things were tough, and thank you for being willing to join us today and share your stories. I don't feel like it's been long enough. I think I agree with you, Loshini. It shouldn't just be in August that we think women. I think we should be sharing stories, men and women, to keep inspiring each other and to remind us all that there's certainly room for all of us at the party. and we can all contribute.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you so much for the
Thank
opportunity.
you.